Alexander the Great was born in 356 BC. As one of the greatest military geniuses in history, he conquered much of the civilized world of his time, driven by the ambition to establish a universal kingdom. From 13 to 16 years of age, he was given a classical Greek education by the noted philosopher Aristotle, and ascended to the Macedonian throne at the age of 20 upon the death of his father, Philip II. In addition to his philosophical training under Aristotle, Alexander was a student of military history, drawing upon the legend of Achilles' courage at Troy and Xenophon's writings of his march through Persia. He believed that Greeks were superior warriors, even when the odds were long against success. The combination of Greek thought and philosophy with military genius produced a quest to not only conquer the world in a military expedition, but to spread Greek cultural values in a noble mission of civilization. It was a great adventure on many levels. His initial military thrust eastward was justified as the liberation of Greek city-states in Asia Minor. With each conquest, his ideal became grander. His tactical abilities produced a series of astonishing conquests all the way to India, spreading Greek civilization into the east and making way for cultural diffusion that changed the world forever. But years of continuous battle wore on Alexander and his army, to the point of rebellion against his unquenchable desire for expansion. Near the end of his brief life, he apparently became increasingly megalomaniacal and paranoid, obsessed with fame, glory, and immortality for himself, pathologically suspicious and distrustful of those around him. When he died in Babylon in about 336 BC, at age 33 under suspicious circumstances, his entire empire collapsed. On June 23, 1936, Edgar Cayce gave a reading for a 2-day-old baby boy in which past lives as Alexander the Great and Thomas Jefferson were described. The child was the nephew of Cayce's personal secretary, Gladys Davis. Cayce observed that as Alexander, the entity had been a great conqueror of the earth, yet depleting others for his own self-exaltation. The attitude that might makes right, that power justifies indulgences, caused him to lose during that lifetime. A caution was given to the parents that if these tendencies were not dealt with, they could run wild, even as they did in the life of Alexander. Despite an unstable family life in which his parents were separated and divorced multiple times, the child had a fairly normal development, due in part to the positive influence of his Aunt Gladys. Such is the pattern of incarnation for many souls. Fame and even greatness in some past lives, interspersed with fairly mundane or even unfavorable experiences in others, as we have seen with Edgar Cayce himself. In a reading given in 1929 for a group of men interested in creating a benevolent world organization to regulate commerce and social institutions, the entranced Cayce cautioned against such a grand enterprise, using Alexander as an example of how such an idealistic venture can become destructive. Cayce noted that Alexander had been educated by the leading philosophers of his day and had set out to conquer the world with honorable intentions. Yet the ideal was forgotten, and Alexander became so gored by greed of power as to become a loathsome body. Gertrude Cayce, in a past life as Normaline, the daughter of Socrates, was said to have been a caretaker or nursemaid for the infant Alexander. 5 other individuals also received readings from Cayce that indicated past lives associated with Alexander, all linked to military campaigns. A 6-year-old boy was told that he had been a general named Uzella serving under Alexander. He functioned as a military engineer who built machines to break down the walls of cities under siege. His parents were told to observe the child's first attempts at using a bow and arrow, or battering ram, or such. Cayce predicted that the child would show an interest in mechanical devices of every nature. With guidance, these abilities and tendencies could be directed into merciful rather than destructive channels. A reading for a 58-year-old man also indicated a past life as a military engineer under Alexander. As Arlabon, the individual diverted waterways to besieged cities and built barricades and defenses to further the conquest. These past life abilities helped explain the current interest in mechanical devices. His reading even suggested that he would be capable of designing a perpetual motion machine, but suggested against the endeavor given his age and resources. A 44-year-old advertising executive who received a reading from Cayce in 1938 was told that he had served Alexander as a soldier named Zuria, who was in charge of maintaining adequate supplies of healthy food and water for the troops. An enormous challenge considering Alexander's ambitious venture. Zuria's efforts were largely unrecognized by historians, yet his fellow soldiers depended upon him to maintain their health and vigor under difficult circumstances. He was told that these positive qualities could be harnessed in his present life to assist youth in attaining health or to recover from physical deficiencies, to find hope in the midst of suffering. Two individuals receiving readings from Cayce learned that they had been among the multitudes conquered by Alexander. A 41-year-old commercial railroad agent was told that he had been a Persian officer to the king's exchequer in the name of Ioso. Prior to Alexander's invasion, Ioso had performed a valuable service to the king with his financial counsel. After the invasion, he languished in a prison. Thus, in his present life, he had a love for the freedom of open spaces. He also carried over the ability to manage financial affairs efficiently. The other case involved a 65-year-old woman who was told that she had a past life as Hannah, a woman living in the household of one of the defenders of a city conquered by Alexander. She suffered under the persecutions of the invaders. Thus, in her present life, she had a dread of invasion of any character, whether physical or mental. The story of Alexander the Great raises some important moral and ethical issues with regard to war. Of course, we must be careful about projecting our own values on previous eras with different settings and circumstances. Yet, even if we assume that wars of aggression and conquest are improper, and that wars in defense of a homeland are justified, what about wars of choice? Specifically, in the case of Alexander, if his ideal was to spread Greek culture and values to those less advanced, or to free the common people of foreign lands from oppressive rulers, is this acceptable? Certainly this is a question that is still relevant in our times. There is also the added dimension of involvement at the individual level by foot soldiers and officers who were simply following orders. What was their moral and ethical obligation? From the Cayce perspective, it all centers on the ideals of each individual involved. In the case of some of the individuals serving under Alexander, the services they rendered were consistent with their ideals and for the most part provided them with the opportunity for soul development. In the 20th century, Cayce gave many readings for soldiers, including two of his own sons who fought in World War II and faced this dilemma. In Alexander's case, he may have started out with a high ideal, but apparently succumbed to self-indulgent power lust, a tragedy for his soul and those he conquered.